Hey everyone, it's Mary at Calumet Knits, and today we're going to make an evil twin headband, but only use 32 needles on our knitting machine. So I'm using Red Heart Super Saver in Bright Stripe, and I'm also using Joann's Big Twist Value in black. So let's take a look at this before we get started. I just did a simple cinched closure for this one, and this measures about 4 1/4 or 11 centimeters wide. And here's a comparison to the 22 needle machine, the 40 needle machine, and a 46 needle machine. Since we're using 32 needles, I'm going to put 16 of those needles to the right and 16 to the left of our normal number 1 position. And I'm going to cast on like we normally do, going behind every other needle from the number 31 needle all the way over to the number 16 needle. If you're using the central, you'll want to cast on from the 29 needle over to the 16 needle. So I go ahead and reset my counter to 0 when I get to that 16th needle position, and I'm going to change direction and start knitting. Now I'll get a close-up view here and show you exactly what I'm doing at the ends of each row so you understand how to get those nice tight clean edges without dropping stitches. So one thing I forgot to mention is our machines are not going to be in flat panel mode. We did not flip the switch for this particular project. We are using the 3 black needles, which are usually reserved for traveling, because I want the counter to work. So our counter is working for every single row that we are doing, and this is not in flat panel mode. So the end stitches are usually where most of our problems occur. So there's certain things that we need to watch for to make sure that we don't get tuck stitches or drop stitches, or that our end stitches are too loose. So let's take a look. The first thing is to make sure that the previous row stitch is pushed to the bottom of the needle before it gets knitted. You can see I'm just pushing it down with my finger to make sure it's seated towards the bottom of the needle, and then we move on. The second thing is to wait for our working yarn to pass under the red bar to the left of our last stitch. Once it's passed, then we can go ahead and change direction. And you'll notice that stitch came up, so we need to make sure that that stitch goes back down. Once our working yarn passes the red bar again, you can remove the slack by tugging on your working yarn, and then you can continue on to the other end where we'll look for these 3 things again. So push the stitch down, wait for the yarn to pass under the bar, wait for it to pass again, remove the slack, and continue to move on. I have another video that's a more in-depth video on how to do flat panels on your circular machines. I will link to that video below so that you can check it out. If you want to add weights, you can do that. I would place the weights on the end stitches as close to it as you can. You can use claw weights, you can use bag clips, whatever would give you just a little bit of weight to pull that stitch down at the end of the row so you don't have to manually do it. I'm using all of the red heart from the middle of the green to the middle of the black. Once that's done, I'll switch over to the black, and in total I'm going to be doing 94 rows. So I'm almost to the end of the red heart yarn, and I'm going to switch over to the black. And here we are at the end of the row. couple of things that I want to point out. Okay, the first is to make sure that that last stitch, the needle is sunken all the way before we change direction. And I've gone ahead and cut my yarn, and I've reversed direction. But now we want to make sure that that stitch actually gets knitted, so I wait for that needle to come back up before we put our new yarn in and continue on. And I'm going to hold both tails together just to make sure I don't drop one, and I do this slowly before moving on. So I'm just going to finish this up and I will show you how to do the bind off. So I've reached the end, and I'm going to make sure that last stitch is pushed down to the bottom of the needle. I don't want to get a tuck stitch or a drop stitch here. Make sure we finish that last stitch. Watch for it to get sunken into the machine, and we can go ahead at this point remove our yarn from the yarn guide. So watch this last stitch here, make sure it doesn't fall off and the needle comes up properly. And then we can move our carriage and use our tapestry needle and our tail to bind off like we normally would. And here is our completed flat panel. To finish off this headband, I'm going to use the mattress stitch and seam up the two long ends of our knitted flat panel. Make sure that as you're seaming this, you're pulling on the seam to make sure that there's enough slack so that while you're wearing the headband, it doesn't feel tight just along that seam. You want that seam to stretch with the rest of the headband. So once I finish that up, I'm going to go ahead and cinch the two ends together like we normally would for a cinched headband. I'm going to secure the ends and sew the two ends together, and I'll secure that and bury the tails, and we have a finished Evil Twin headband. Once again, here are the size comparisons with the 22, the 40, and the 46 needle machines. And as I mentioned before, I do have a video on how to do flat panels that's a little more in depth than what I went over here today. You can check out that link below, as well as links to my shops and other places that you can find me. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.